following President Cyril Ramaphosa's remarks in his weekly From the Desk of the President letter today. Joining us now to discuss the tariffs and the impact on the country is Matthew Parks, COSATU Parliamentary Co-ordinator. Good afternoon and thank you for joining us. I hope you can hear us now.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having us. I can hear you perfectly. Thank you.
Wonderful. How's COSATU supporting workers in industries like citrus, as well as the automotive industries who are heavily impacted by these 30% tariffs?
So we're extremely worried. We have an economy that's been struggling at 1% growth for the past 17 years. We have a 43% unemployment rate. We have a 72% youth unemployment rate. We just can't simply afford to fold our arms and to see companies retrenching workers, be it on the citrus farms of the Western Cape or Limpopo. We can't afford to see jobs being shed in our motor manufacturing industry, whether it's in the Eastern Cape or KZN or Gauteng. And of course, if the economy declines, that means less tax revenue to fund the public services that society depends upon. So for us, this is a crisis. It needs to be fixed. I think our intervention needs to be around threefold. Number one is for government at the highest levels, be it the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, be it the Minister for Trade Industry and the Minister for Ronald Lamula in Parkstown, to intervene. Yes, DTIC must continue its work to put in place a new trade agreement with the US. They have made many good proposals. We need to flesh this out, make sure they're bold and progressive and so forth. But also the reason why we have a 30% tariff as opposed to 15% for neighboring states and most other countries is because of the bilateral tensions. I think that needs to be, it requires a president's intervention as a head of state to continue the work he's already set in place in May when he visited Washington, etc., because those need to be addressed. And we think they can be addressed in a way which protects workers, which respects our sovereignty, our constitutional democracy and so forth. But also in the medium term, DTIC is correct to put in place relief measures to affected industries and workplaces, but that's going to be difficult, to be honest with you. It takes time to release money, to process applications, and for money to reach workers and companies' bank accounts. We saw that during COVID. There is a need for the Unemployment Insurance Fund to resolve the long outstanding bureaucratic delays when it comes to companies applying for the Temporary Employment Relief Scheme under the UF. Currently, it takes about 12 to 14 months, and companies, be it furniture companies, be it automotive companies, be it farms, don't have 14 months to play with. But let's try to fix it quickly. But I think for us, really, we've got to address the 30% tariff immediately to see, can we reduce that from the 30% to what is the new norm of 15%, so that we can be at a level playing field with our neighbors in the region in Africa, but also our competitors across the world. But yes, we must put in place support from DTIC, from the UIF, but ultimately we have to resolve the bilateral issues which are fueling this, and that requires the highest level of intervention by the President, by his ministers from DIRCO, from DTIC, from agriculture, etc. But what we can't afford is to allow the 30% to become the new norm, because it's just going to see workers sent to the unemployment queue. And yes, we agree with the argument that says we must diversify trade, no doubt about that. We must expand trade opportunities, no doubt about it, but that takes time. That's a longer-term solution. Right now, we need to deal with the immediate crisis.
Is COSATU engaging at all with the US government on these tariffs, or are you relying specifically on the South African government to do that work?
So, look, ultimately, government must lead, and the government led by the President, by the ministers, have been working this front. We as COSATU have been working with the presidency, with DIRCO, DTIC on this journey for the past 4 years. We've worked closely with our colleagues in organized business as well, because ultimately we all want the same solution. We want to see investment flowing into South Africa. We want to see trade and investment opportunities being expanded. We want to see jobs being saved and being created. And of course, to have stable relations, not just with the US, but also with the European Union, with Russia, with China, with India, Brazil, etc. We do have engagement with our colleagues in the US and the trading movement there. We've also had quite a few engagements over the years with colleagues in the US administration, the Trade Representative's Office, the Congress, and so forth. But ultimately, these matters are matters of the state, and of course, hence, our set of view as COSATU is that we will continue to work closely with the presidency, with DIRCO, with DTIC. We think we need to give them the support, the space. These are not simple, easy matters to resolve. They're very complicated. And that's also why we're asking for organizations, be it on the populist fringe, the AfriForums, the NIASA, the Sakaligas of the world, to stop spreading fake news about white persecution, white genocide, other made-up stuff. And also, for example, the EFF too must also come to the party, because whether it's on the far right or the far left, the fake news, the populist antics, the race baiting, etc., it doesn't help. It makes matters more difficult for government when we need to give government some space to negotiate very complex, difficult issues. Yes, we're a democracy. Yes, political parties, be it the JB, they have every right to hold the state accountable, but also at times we must rally around the flag. And when it comes to moments of national crisis, we must put aside our partisan differences. Those can come on a different date. And for us right now is to resolve this crisis, because it's going to be Afrikaner farmers who pay a price. It's going to be South African farm workers, motor manufacturing workers who pay the price, and that we can't afford to tolerate or to accept.
In the briefing, at least, the ministers discussed diversifying South Africa's export markets to reduce reliance on the US. But this is not going to happen overnight. What are your thoughts?
No, exactly. That is a journey. It's a correct journey. Irrespective of this diplomatic issues with the US, irrespective of the 30% tariffs, because you have 1% economic growth, because you have 43% unemployment, because you've got deindustrialization, that is something we needed to do long ago. And a crisis can be good if it helps to expedite efforts in that regard. We have been seeing government making efforts to unlock new markets for agricultural goods in the Philippines, in Thailand, in China. That's correct. We need to accelerate efforts around the African free trade continental area, because that is where our destination lies. That is our largest market and so forth. And of course, we want to support Africa's development because it helps manage the migration issues and so on. But those will take time. Farmers and farm workers sitting with crates full of citrus exports waiting to go need to have this issue resolved in a matter of days. So yes, we must diversify. We must also resolve our domestic constraints in economic growth, whether it's around reliable and affordable electricity, around efficient freight rail and ports and so forth, corruption, municipal services, all those issues must be dealt with. But today we need to make sure that South African exports to the US don't implode. So I think for us, it's about multiple interventions, short, medium, and long term. And of course, we must work with our colleagues in government business to see how do we complement each other's efforts, how do we give support. And we must rally around the South African flag, because in moments of crisis, that's not when we need to score partisan points. That's when we need to defend the South African nation, and primarily the issues of workers, of the economy, of businesses, and so forth.
That was actually my final question for you about COSATU involved in talks with government. You've just said that you're working together with government and business to mitigate the economic impact of tariffs and ensure fair trade relations.
Yes, so I mean, look, for us, we're all in the same boat as South Africa. Whether you're in government, who depends upon companies to make profits, to pay taxes, or whether there's workers who need companies to be sustainable so they can pay workers' salaries, so they can create new jobs. We're all in the same boat together. We need each other to do well. And we've all got a different role to play. We've been working closely with government over the past 4 years under the 6th administration. We're working closely with government on the 7th administration. We'll raise our views frankly. When we think government has messed up or fumbled, we'll point that out to them. But also we need to give space and support to government too, because these issues are very difficult. And if government doesn't succeed, it is going to be those farm workers in Citrusdal and Limpopo and Zanin. It's going to be those motor manufacturing workers in East London, in Richards Bay, who are going to pay the price. And we just can't afford that, not when we have unemployment being so high.
Matthew, AGOA is due to come to an end at the end of August, I believe, beginning of September. And it's unlikely that AGOA agreement will be renewed. That seems like a double whammy, really, because things like citrus was protected by the AGOA Act, wasn't it? Agreement.
Yes, so AGOA has been a positive thing. It's been there for about past 3 decades under Democratic and Republican administrations. It's really helped to open up tariff-free access to South Africa and to African goods to the US, the world's largest economy. It's also helped to support economic integration across the African continent, so that our car exports to the US, for example, include parts from Lesotho, from Botswana, from Cote d'Ivoire, from Tunisia, etc. It's difficult. How would a free trade agreement or bilateral free trade agreement, so to speak, exist in the world of tariffs? We think there is still space for AGOA, which can benefit South Africa. It could help have a uniform tariff regime for the African continent. It could help protect South Africa from extreme levels like 30%. It could also help insulate our goods from other additional tariff duties, taxes, and so forth. It can provide support for the African economic integration and complement the African free trade continent area. We have made engagements to the United States Trade Representative in support of AGOA, South Africa's continued membership of it, and how it also benefits the US too, because the trade agreement has to be mutually beneficial if it's to be sustainable. We were pleasantly surprised by feedback from the US Congress, from both the Senate and the House of Reps, from both Democrats and Republicans, that they all support AGOA, and they are largely looking for a signal from the White House. Ultimately, President Trump, would he support that? We think that's a critical matter for our Minister for Trade Industry, Park Stow, for our President Ramaphosa to engage. We think there is a chance. The US colleagues have indicated to us they could renew it quite quickly, or that requires a signal from the White House. And we think it can be mutually beneficial because the US is having to negotiate 196 trade agreements simultaneously. That's a lot of pressure. AGOA can be a useful, mutually beneficial regime in that regard. But whether or not it's done, it's difficult to say. But it remains in force.
I'm sorry to cut in. We have a breaking story that we're going to go to. Thank you so much for your thoughts and your views on that. And we will be catching up with you in the coming weeks, especially over that AGOA agreement and tariffs.